I believe if we go to connect here and you navigate to the workshop either in session or you click on the past option, if you click on a particular workshop, it should list me as the host and it'll give you the opportunity to view my profile and then send me a message there. So, yeah, if you have any questions, just reach out to me with a PM. I typically like to ask people if they have any suggestions for workshops or tutorials to message me. And the reason why is because I want to make content for you that is useful to you as a user of ACDC. Hi, MQ. Yeah, so if you just have any questions at all, or there's anything that you'd like to see covered that I don't, or you want to have something illuminated to you that you don't quite understand fully as a user, I would love for you to reach out, and that gives me content to produce that is relevant to you. And the classic question or the classic comment really is, if you're wondering about something, the likelihood of someone else is wondering it as well. So I do want to basically provide a platform to have that content done. Yeah. Anyway, so that's sort of just my blurb at the top. But yeah, we're sort of people are slowly filtering in here, and we're gonna get started shortly, talking about frequency separation and talking about looking at images and sort of addressing imperfections in them. Okay, cool. Can everybody see my little red mouse highlight that I have here? Something that I've been considering recently is for obviously for those with color blindness, red might not be a great color for that. But I feel like it's one of those things where it would still be probably to some degree still visible. Um, yeah, it's hard to choose like a select the right color for that. Okay. If you have any questions during the course of the workshop, just fire them into the Q&A panel. You should be able to open the Q&A panel from there'll probably be an ellipses, like a dot, dot, dot on your settings at the bottom, and it should be something that you can bring up. There, yeah. Okay. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to hide these tools here. We're almost 4 minutes after here. Okay. So, most of you are going to have some familiarity with a couple tools to address facial imperfections in ACDC. Let's talk about some of them right off the top. So when I open up an image in ACDC, I have just on base value, I have this tool called Face Edit, and I also have the ability to address skin tune issues. So in adjustment layers, for example, if I was to click on skin tune allows me to smooth the subject, and it also allows me to add this sort of glow to the subject matter. What you might notice is that this has its limitations. And what I mean by that is this often is pushing a lot of new filters onto your image that is going to obfuscate, I guess, the original intention of the image. And that's fine. There's uses for this, and obviously more in this case, like far more reduced. Effects are going to have a more of a natural appearance than that sort of egregious effect that is just applied. But the point being is that it's only has a certain degree of utility here. And even with masks, right, when we apply a mask to this particular effect, and we say are applying it maybe to sections of our image, there's going to be a limitation in terms of the amount of usefulness that we can get out of this. So while good and very, very subtle, subtle application of skin tunes can be really, really useful. Uh, what we're going to be showing today is going to be a much more in-depth way of addressing what I'm calling stray hairs, which stray hairs are sort of unintentional hairs that are going to be obscuring the face or in any way obscuring the background that you want to remove. Stray hairs are pretty common, especially in fashion photography, where you'll see you're going to be taking thousands of photos, and occasionally just one hair is going to be, or a feeling, a couple hairs are going to be obscuring the face, and this comes from, extensive sort of work that's done with hair and makeup, where, one part of the hair is going to be obscuring the face. But it's very easy to remove them, and removing them works very similar to the way that we're going to be addressing facial blemishes, so like things like zits and maybe like red marks and such on the face. The other location that we sort of address facial imperfections in a sort of more a general application, not as selectively as we're going to be talking about today, but is within the face edit tool. And the face edit tool, I believe, actually has skin tune effects within it. So this gives you the ability to address, let's see here, skin. So I can go in and I can smooth things like wrinkles and crow's feet and just do general smoothing and glow, which we just did in the Skin Tune tool as an adjustment layer. The thing to note is that AI Face Edit, in this case, all of these editing functions, as a result of them being a filter, and what I mean by filter is that in edit mode, all of these filters that you see on the left-hand panel here, these are all non-destructive adjustments, or sorry, these are destructive adjustments rather, versus adjustment layers that interact with masking. Masking is all non-destructive. So just as a general note, when we open up the Face Edit tool and we make a skin tune adjustment, like the same one we did here a moment ago with the smoothing and glow, let's just apply that. When we do that application, right, and say click done, for example, what's going to happen is there's going to be a sort of a destructive adjustment that is applied over top of our base image layer. And the only way to sort of, make any edits to this would to be to go back or to undo an action. That's not non-destructive. That would be a destructive adjustment. And the reason why is because when we go to save this image, that undo history is lost, and therefore we can't go forward and sort of adjust these values any further. So, a long story short, when we interact with something like Face Edit, and Face Edit has incredible minutia of like really, really small detailed adjustments, but we must understand that when we go to do these changes, there are going to be destructive adjustments. So we have to be sure that this is the change that we want to make for our image. Okay, enter what we're going to be talking about today, which is frequency separation. So I'm going to undo that action that I did because we're going to be utilizing layers in addition to filters to make the adjustments that we're making today. I'm just going to move in a little bit here. So just out of curiosity, how many people, so I talk about this maybe once a year, so I would be surprised if many of you are familiar with this. How many of you have used frequency separation to address the issues that I'm talking about here? How many of you are even familiar with the term frequency separation, just on a scale? Sonia says never, which is kind of what I'm expecting. Laurent says no. Mike probably has used it before. Jay, nope. Gordon, no. Okay. Yeah, it's funny. This is a tool that was added to AC/DC many, many years ago, but because it's somewhat buried in the user interface, people aren't aware of it, but it's a really powerful tool. MK said I did, but I wasn't sure what I wanted. Yeah, totally fair. We'll talk about that today. Jesse, sometimes, yeah. Gordon, no. Okay, great. Totally answered my question. For the most part, it sounds like some people are familiar with it, or sorry, aren't familiar with it. A couple people are familiar with it, but there might be some limitations on that familiarity. And that's okay. So, frequency separation, just before I open up the tool and talk about it, what it does is it separates your base image layer. And what I mean by that is it takes qualities from your base image layer and it separates them into these two separate layers. The qualities are broadly what I'm going to call, I guess, the color is sort of separated from the texture or the sort of the particulate sort of highly contrast aspects of your photo are separated from general hue. And you'll see what I mean in a moment when I talk about that. But what this does is by separating sort of the detail, the texture of your image, the areas where there's intense contrast between sections, from what I'm referring to as the color here, pardon me, enables you to go in and basically edit these things individually. And by individually editing them, It allows for extremely refined adjustments. And I remember being having this tool introduced to me by one of our developers when it was added to the software and being like blown away with the results because it's so good at what it does. So let's talk about frequency separation. So it's obviously pretty obvious here. Unfortunately, I'm sort of singling out this woman with her blemishes here, but it's a great photo to illustrate frequency separation because there is some sort of red blemish elements, and there's obviously some zits in this image. Later, what we'll do is we'll talk about this same tool for addressing straight hairs. But basically, this person has some blemishes, and we're going to address them. We're going to try to remove them. We're making a value statement about these blemishes. So so forgive that, but we're going to address them as a sort of a correctively, as something that we want to remove in our image. But I want to stress too that this can be used to address not just facial imperfections. What I want you to think about when we're interacting with frequency separation is the ways that we can sort of partition our image and address issues of texture in our image or smooth and blur elements of our image as well. So this might also be useful for getting rid of certain things from like backgrounds that we want to remove, or we want to address other things like we're talking about with stray hairs, things in our image that fall into one of these sort of spectrums that we're going to be looking at. Okay, so when we're interacting with frequency separation, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be splitting this image into two qualities, like I mentioned. They're called a high pass layer and a low pass layer. But before I do that, I actually want to make a duplication of our base layer. I'm going to do that, and I'm actually going to rename this layer, and I'm going to rename it, we're going to call it the original. When we're interacting with frequency separation and when we're interacting with filters, we're going to be talking about the repair tool and the blur tool today. When we do that and we're still interacting with layers, I want to make sure that I'm making duplications of these layers. And the reason why is because fundamentally, when we interact with filters, they are destructive. So as long as I'm creating duplications of these base layers, or I'm creating some sort of history of my changes, then I'm not truly operating non-destructively, but I am adding an element that allows me to go back and sort of make changes as I go through my images here. So I guess the point about making a duplication is it allows me a certain degree of safety, and I'm sort of operating more non-destructively than just making filter adjustments. I'm being able to keep this original image in my layer order, rather than going in, making a filter adjustment from my original image, and then completely losing the original in the process of editing. So I'm just doing this as kind of like as a best practice, basically. So on our blemish layer here, we're going to name this. We'll just call it blemish. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to go to the frequency separation tool. And as I said earlier, when I said this was kind of a buried in the user interface, it's a layer operation. So you can find it within the right click of a layer and frequency separate from there. So we'll click on frequency separation. Hopefully everybody can see it there. It's just above the layer effects and underneath the paste section here. So I'm going to click on that. And when I open it, it's going to do this kind of odd thing where I'm viewing a new user interface with my image separated into this high frequency layer and a low frequency layer. And hopefully everybody can see that there is a difference between these two things. The low frequency feels like a blurred version of our layer. And we lose a lot of the contrast from what I'm calling the texture layer or the high frequency layer right here. The high frequency layer depicts sort of dramatic changes in contrast, and it's most visible around the facial features like hair and eyes, and even around the clothes to a certain extent. And so one of the values of creating a split or a partition is that we can interact with the texture on its own, which we'll showcase in a moment. There's also this tool up at the top, this blur radius. And what I can do is I can actually increase this radius until I start to see the color, the hue pull through in my image. As you notice, on a blur radius of about 36, the color of the eyes, so that white of the eyes, is starting to be apparent. When we're making a frequency separation, we want to avoid that color coming through. So we want to get as much of the radius out of our image as possible prior to any of that color being visible. So 26 pixels, which is a little bit more than the default settings for this image, is what I'm looking for. This is pretty good. I can see a little bit of that color pour through in the eyes, but it's no way as egregious as the 36 that we saw earlier. What we're trying to avoid is making a frequency separation where you can see the reds and all of these elements pour through. This is an example at 66 pixels, for example. So this is not what we're trying to get. I think by default, it sets it at 15, which you can see here is pretty minimal in terms of the texture that comes through in the high pass layer. So we'll increase this. We'll just increase this, let's say about 26, like I said. 26 is fine. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to reduce I'm trying to get as much of this texture to come through in the high pass layer as possible before any color emerges in this high pass layer. And I can just preview what they both look like. Naturally, the low frequency layer will appear more blurred than it did previously. So that's what's happening here. Gordon asked, is the image screen just gray for most people? So this should appear gray to you, Gordon. Um, again, this is sort of the image as it pertains to this textural detail. These like hot elements of high contrast, but without the sort of the hue coming through very much. So when I have the high frequency selected here with this modal selector, you will see gray appear predominantly in this image here. Now, I don't know how much of this detail comes through to you watching a Zoom session, but note that there is like content within this gray. I don't know what it looks like for you right now, but you should be able to see the very faint outline of my subject matter here. Gordon, is that visible to you? I haven't done this a workshop in about a year, so okay, see, great. That's all I needed to hear. So yeah, you can see a little bit of our subject. That's all that matters. So you're completely up to speed. Everything's working normally for you in this. Versus our low frequency layer, which appears like in this case, slightly more blurred layer than it did at our 15 or 16 radius that we had earlier. That's it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click done. This looks the way I want it to. And when I click done, you will see that my layer here has been partitioned in the way that I asked it to in the frequency separation tool. So when I say that it's been partitioned, I mean that that blemish high pass layer, the high frequency layer, is visible, and it contains the same degree of detail that was visible in that section there, or the previous window. And the low pass layer is also visible to us as well. Note that that change that I made, that frequency adjustment, that change replaced my layer. So when I said that the original matters and keeping the original in my layer order, the reason why I did that is because this adjustment of making a frequency separation on my image replaced that layer entirely. So it's, again, good practice to just sort of keep that original layer by duplicating it. I'm just realizing I didn't really showcase how to duplicate, but you can right click on your layer to duplicate, or you can click this little icon that appears beneath the layer order itself to duplicate an image. Okay, so now what we've done is we've separated our image into this low pass layer that contains generally the hue and the high pass layer that generally contains the texture or the detail of our image. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be actually interacting with these layers individually and adjusting them. One of the things that's worth noting is that the high pass layer has a blend mode applied to it. So a blend mode is going to apply a certain degree of, I guess, algorithmic transparency that will then be applied to the image layer that appears beneath it. So this high pass layer when applied with a blend mode, in this case linear light, is being applied to the image layer that appears beneath it, which in this case has a normal blend mode. So when it does that, what we can see is that this, I guess, adds that detail to the image that would otherwise, if I hide this, not have it whatsoever. So, which is very different than applying this as a normal layer, which, as you can see, what it does is that linear light is that sort of application of it being applied as a transparency is removed. So we want to make sure that we keep this layer on linear light, which then sort of adds the texture back to our image. Because the culmination of this high pass layer and this low pass layer is equivalent to the original that appears beneath it. The culmination of these two layers is the original image. They just contain very different information that when blend together is the original image. Okay, so let's interact with our low pass layer. So our low pass layer is this layer right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hide my high pass layer altogether. And I'm going to click on my blemish layer here, which is the low pass. And I'm going to do, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it into the blur tool. So by bringing it into the blur tool, we're going to blur out certain portions of this low pass layer. And just as a recap, all I've done so far is make a duplication of my image. That was it. And all I've done is right click and apply a frequency separation to my image with the adjusting the radius in such that I bring out as much detail in that high pass layer as possible. That's all I've done. So let's take our low pass layer and I'm going to open it up into blur. So blur is in detail here. And in this way, we have to interact with a filter. We have to interact with a destructive adjustment. So we're going to do that. We're going to go to blur here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to blur selectively rather than universally. So when we open up the blur tool, this gives me the ability to further blur my image universally, as you can see by addressing the Gaussian blur here and the amount. But what we want to do here is we want to blur with the brush tool. So I'm going to click on the brush tool, and the brush tool is going to open up a selective application of this Gaussian blur. And so from here, what I can do is I can zoom in on my subject, and we're going to apply a Gaussian blur to these areas that appear quite red, these blemishes that I talked about earlier. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to gently click on some of these red areas on the skin here, and we're going to blur them. And this doesn't have to be super detail forward, but I'm just going to do that. So all I've done here is I blurred my subject's, I guess, zits, and you can actually see the before and after right here. So that has addressed the color and has slightly blurred the appearance, pardon me, of the zits in the image here. When I click on done, there we go. You can see that the application has been applied. But one of the things you might notice is this high pass layer still contains that visual appearance of the zit, the texture that we're seeing over top, right? So one of the things we can do is we can address both layers individually or just address the color. If my main concern here was that these zits were too red, then what I could do is I could use the low pass layer, as I did there, and just blur the redness of the zits themselves to address that issue. And while I can still maintain or leave the detail of the sort of topical aspects of the facial imperfection, I can leave that as is. So I'm just stating that right now, one of the ways that we can address facial imperfections is by just looking at the color itself prior to adjusting any of these the detail of them. What we're going to do now, though, is we're going to take this one step further and we're actually going to repair, or rather remove the detail of the zit over top of it, independently of the color of that sort of facial blemish. Sorry, Chuck asked, will this work as well with black and white images? Yeah, this effect of frequency separation still works with black and white images. the low pass layer in this case is not going to contain that sort of high contrast between like whites and blacks that we would associate with this high pass layer. Like it still works. It just this low pass layer then contains just lower saturation, and it sort of, like I said earlier, it takes that element and it blurs it out. So I don't think of this so much as color, but rather as, I guess, degrees of saturation. We're trying to split this high pass layer. This high pass layer contains that sort of intense contrasty elements. So the air elements here where the hair is, where we can see such degrees of, we can see these kind of blacks pour through, and elements of the eyes and such where it has this like, degree of contrast between that and then sort of the rough sort of smooth, saturated elements of the skin tone or the background. So all I'm trying to say here, Chuck, is that yes, the same tool works within that context. Okay, so what I've done here is I've separated the high pass layer, I've hidden the low pass layer, the one that we just edited. And all I'm going to do here is inversely, rather than taking this into the blur tool, I'm going to take this tool into, or take this layer into the repair tool. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to apply a repair action on the actual textural components, those high contrast zits that appear on my image here. And to do that, I'm going to use a blended clone. So I have blended clone selection here. I can adjust the nib width by either using the slider or by just using my scroll wheel on my mouse. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and make references by right-clicking an area of her skin that doesn't contain a zit or other blemish. And I'm going to right-click on the areas that do. So I'm going to take these reference samples and I'm going to right-click on the areas of my subject that don't contain that or do contain the blemishes. And then I'm just going to go through and I'm going to very methodically remove these blemishes. And again, when I use blended clone, it's going to do a good job of blending that texture in with the subject or with the subject matter that appears beneath it. And I can really just take my time with this. It doesn't have to be a quick process. I can go in and I can just address some of these facial imperfections just by clicking on my and making these reference snapshots. To make a reference snapshot, all I do is I right click rather than left click, and then left click on the area that I'm applying the blended clone to. This is probably the more noteworthy blemish, the one just on this person's chin. And we can get rid of some of these facial bumps here. And I'm just going to go through and, like I said, very, very methodically just remove some of these blemishes from my subject. Some of these appear to be quite red even when zoomed in here. You can sort of see the textural elements that come through. What Chuck was talking about or asking about is this is the areas of my image. This eyelashes, for example, are quite black or have very low light. And that is distinct rather from the lower saturated, or sorry, not lower, medium saturated areas like the skin here. And so this is what's captured in that high pass layer. Um, so Tristan asked, why not do that on the actual image instead? Meaning the blend clone tool. What's the difference? One of the things you're going to see when you go to use the actual image and apply this is that there's going to be a higher likelihood that you have artifacts appear, or that the blending of the actual effect of you addressing these facial imperfections is going to be flawed. That there's going to be because in the way that I'm interacting with it, the color or the low pass layer is treated distinctly from the high pass layer, that there's less issue of me going through and addressing this and having there be like kind of these blurry splotches that appear on your final image that obfuscate or look like it's been doctored. The way that frequency separation works is it's so refined that you move past that and basically it addresses human error. In this case, it's a way to sort of not worry too much about the final product because the final product is going to be so refined through the process. So I don't just apply adjustments. I always use frequency separations when it comes to this particular outcome because it just addresses any human error and it also removes a lot of the even the failure of the system to blend appropriately. Issues where you're looking at your blend and the blend has been applied in such a way that you're like, oh, it doesn't look perfect. And no matter how many times you've applied it, it's still sort of not doing the perfect job of that, even if it's passable. Well, we're just going to completely bypass that using frequency separation because, as I'm about to show you, the results are outstanding. So, okay, I feel like that's looking pretty good. I feel like most of the blemishes I was concerned about are removed on this high pass layer. And again, all I did was use the blended clone tool by making right click set points and then blending that over top of a given blemish. And when I click done, it's going to apply that high pass adjustment. So this has been edited and now the blemish or the low pass layer that exists beneath it, I can see the effect of those adjustments together. So all I've done is unhide the low pass layer. Actually, what I'll do is I'll open up the original here and we can look at a comparison side by side here. So this is our original image. And what we've done is we've gone in and we've addressed both the low pass layer with the blur tool and the high pass layer with the repair tool. And our final outcome is this image. And I guess my point being is that this is a really, really respectful way to have edited this image. Uh, there's really no obvious signs of this image being doctored whatsoever. And this was because we were allowed to essentially address the texture of our image separately from, I guess, the hue or the sort of low sat or medium saturated elements. So again, just the sort of before and after looks really good. Here, I'll move my nib there. You can see that in our final image here. So just to recap, and we'll look a little bit at the actual stray hairs now. Just a recap of this, all I've done is I took my image layer, my base original image layer, I right-clicked and I applied a frequency separation to my image. And then from there, what I did was I interacted with this low pass layer by blurring the color, specifically the red parts of our image here, the parts that are on the face here, interacting with the red parts there. And then I actually removed the blemishes themselves in the high pass layer, the texture of them, the sort of like light appearance of them with the high pass layer. And all I did was use a repair tool. And then this layer, when blended with linear light over top of the low pass layer, gives me this final outcome of my image with all of the respective adjustments on it. Yeah, so Chuck said you would have to be careful not to delete freckles if they're an element you want to keep. Totally. And one of the things that we sort of omitted here, or I tried to address here, is on this right side and on the nose here, the nose line. You can see that the freckles, for the most part, are still visible. It looks like the freckles are in the nose line and around the edge or the bridge of the nose here. And those appear to be, for the most part, pretty consistent in our image. It appears as though the freckles are maintained, but the blemishes are there. But this was something that, like you said, we have to be sure of what we're interacting with. I don't want to be necessarily removing my freckles when all I'm trying to do here is address some of these issues. It looks like some parts like this freckle was maintained, but the other blemishes are removed. Okay, so that's a good point as well, worth noting. I'm going to go back to manage mode here. Yeah, let's save this image here. Skin blemish, final. And then I'll just go a side-by-side comparison really quickly here. I'm going to flatten this. Doesn't matter now that it's complete. But so that's the final image, and this is the first image. And so we can, again, do a side-by-side visualization of the original image on the left and our adjustment on the right, as you can see. Okay, let's talk a little bit very briefly about stray hairs, which is going to utilize the same tool that we did previously. We're going to be doing the exact same thing. So, stray hairs are notorious for being over top of other textural elements in our image, and which make them very difficult to blend without frequency separation. Um, so we have a couple stray hairs in our image here, right here. Like for example, if I was to just go in and do the repair tool on my stray hair here and attempt to smart erase my hair, I'll just overlap. Um, that application leaves a little bit to be desired. The pathing on the nib can be seen here. And you can try over and over and over again to remove that stray hair that appears. And there might be some degree of success that you'll get that is greater. You might, try this over and over again. That did a horrible job. My point being is that stray hairs, that textural element of the stray hair, is easier addressed rather than using something like the Smart Erase tool, where there might still be errors that are involved with the process of removing them. It's much easier to remove them utilizing the frequency separation tool than it would be to remove them manually using something like Smart Erase or Blended Clone. So let's showcase what I mean. Same thing exactly. I'll take my base image here. I'm going to rename, or I'm going to duplicate my image here. I'm going to create a rename. I'll just call this blemish again. And then I'm going to apply the same effect. So I'm going to right click on my image and I'm going to apply a frequency separation. And I will have a peek. It looks like it's pretty good. Yep. So we'll click done using that same 26 radius. And you can see that my top layer and bottom layer uh, are visible here. Well, let's remove the base layer just so you can see. And you'll notice that in this tool, when we look at the low pass layer, the low pass layer actually doesn't have any those issues present because what we're not addressing necessarily the blemish here where there's that portion of red. It's just a stray hair. So really what we're interacting with is actually entirely the textural component of this. We will leave the low pass layer alone. And what we'll do is we'll interact with the high pass layer. Pardon me. So what I'll do is I'll open up the repair tool once again. And I'm just going to use blended clone again. I'm just going to work my way through these hairs. And I will remove them the exact same way. I think you can also use Smart Erase for this, I would imagine. But I'm going to move my way through this hair in the same way, these two hairs that appeared on the top here. And let's just for the sake of this editing process, we'll just go through and we'll just make a quick adjustment and apply that blended clone. And then as you can see that the degree of which that leaves some sort of artifact in this case is very much reduced through this process. And if I wanted to go in and repair it slightly or make any adjustments, I could do that just by interacting with the high pass layer here. But in effect here, oh, there's another one right there. So we could open up this image once again into the repair tool, and I can just address this. So I'll go into the blended clone here. Actually, let's just try Smart Erase on this one and see how that works. I'm just going to make sure that I cancel this layer so I can see this properly. I'm going to go through. Let's try Smart Erase, see if it does a better job than blended clone does. Okay, click done. See how it did. Way too messy. So we're going to go through and we're going to go back in and we'll do a repair tool of that. And we'll stick with blended clone. I'm just going to right click using a reference point and click done. And there we are. So, point being, frequency separation allows us to address issues of, in this case, it allows us to separate our image into these opposing forms. One that contains this, broadly, what I'm just referring to as the color or the medium saturation elements of our image, and allows us to address things like, in the case of our blemishes, it allows us to look at the reds and blur those in with the colors that exist around it, lessening the effect of something like a zit that has a red sort of agitated portion around it. Then what it allows us to do is address actual textural differences in the high pass layer. Things like, in this case, what we're looking at is stray hairs in our image, but it also allowed us to remove the actual detail of the raised bump elements that have this like contrast difference between the low pass layer and the high pass layer. And by doing so, when we, pardon me, split these elements into two and we edit these separately, it allows us to a greater degree of control that wouldn't be applied, that wouldn't be possible just using something like Smart Erase or the blended clone tool on its own. That will probably leave more artifacts in place, something that we would need to like work through very, very gently over a long time to sort of properly remove. And so frequency separation allows us to work really incrementally. And honestly, it's a lot easier in application than trying to go through and make the perfect, blend adjustment or something like that with the repair tool or with the blur tool or something like that. So I want you to add frequency separation to your arsenal of ways of interacting with your image because it's such a strong tool. And it's one that, like I said previously, is a bit buried in the user interface because you have to understand like what the purpose of this would be. But frequency separation is a extremely strong tool for addressing these particular issues. And we didn't talk about it in this image per se, but there's a lot of these looser hairs that appear around the edges of our image with the background. And the same process works, right? All I would be doing would be looking at the high pass layer here and doing a frequency separation of the high pass layer in relation to these sort of stray hairs that exist on the left here. And this would allow us just such a great degree of control and editing in our image here. So as a workflow, you might have a whole bunch of developments that you're working on in your image, and you've sort of saved down an image that you really, really like. What I would recommend is when you have an image that's otherwise the colors look really good and you really like the lighting and the hues in your image, what I would do is I would save down a copy of your image as a JPEG or some form of editable file type, open it up in edit mode, and then save in this case, save an ACDC file where you would interact with blemishes, edits. And then what this is going to do is this file then is going to give you the ability to save these high pass and low pass layers so that you can interact with them. Now, these layers, like I said, because we're interacting with things like the repair tool or the blur tool in filters, these two layers are going to be destructive. But because we've saved the original file in this ACDC file, because we have the history of all these files in here, we can see what we've done. And at any point, we can go back and we can make like new frequency separations that maybe address issues that we didn't see in our previous one. So this gives us a degree of control. And what I mean by that is I can open up this image in the future and I can go and I can make adjustments to, say, the original file, or I can make adjustments to the frequency separation in my image. And the same was the case for this other image that I have here, where I can go in and I can have the history of the high pass layer and the low pass layer with its respective adjustments here. That sort of covers what I wanted to talk about today. Does anyone else have any other questions? Chuck says, very quick, how did you combine the high pass and low pass layers? This is a great question. Let's just delete this blur layer here. Oh, I see what I've done here. Okay, I used the low pass layer and I blurred. Okay, well, let's go back. Let's go back to this file then, which is a bit more easy to understand. So Chuck is asking, how does one, see both of these effects at the same time? How are they combined? Well, Chuck, I have my low pass layer here and my high pass layer here. There's two ways to combine these now that these adjustments are complete. One is that I can merge the layers down, but that is a destructive adjustment, and we would lose the separation, pardon me, of these two layers. But naturally, when we create a frequency separation, the topmost layer, the high pass layer, will always have a linear light blend. So as long as these layers are visually at the top of your layer order, and as long as these layers are both visually turned on, meaning that I'm clicking this preview icon and I'm making sure that they both have the eye icon associated with it. As long as this linear light layer, the high pass layer, appears above my layer beneath it, then it's going to appear as though they're combined visually. So this high pass layer is affecting the layer that exists beneath it due to its blend mode that it has applied. Does that answer your question? Ultimately, when you make a frequency separation, that effect is going to already, that linear light application is already going to be applied to the high pass layer because it's a product or it's something that you need in order to view it as a comprehensive image here. The other thing, like I said, you can always merge the layer down if you no longer want this like high pass, low pass layer. It'll blend them together, but that's a destructive adjustment. And so, I wouldn't necessarily suggest doing that unless you plan on doing something else with your image where you need these layers sort of removed or you need them to combined in some way. But by default, it's already that linear light application, that blend is going to be applied, which means that if the high pass layer appears above your low pass layer in the layer order, everything will appear as needed, as suggested. Brian, you're so welcome. Gordon asked, is that only in AI mode? What do you mean, Gordon? This is an edit mode adjustment. So there's no AI. I actually haven't used any AI tools in this whole process. It's all been just general editing adjustments. But yeah, if you have any other questions, let me know. Oh, yeah, AI actions. Yeah, we didn't use any in this workshop. So for all intent and purposes, this is the same user interface needed. We didn't use any selections or masking using AI. All we did was have our base image. And then we used frequency separation on our base image. What maybe you're highlighting is that this uses the layers, or rather the layer tool in AC/DC. And so in order to do frequency separation, we have to interact with layers, but we're not interacting with any AI operations. Robert, sadly, no, there is no similar function in development. Now, like I mentioned earlier, one of the rudimentary aspects of the skin tune tool, there is the face editing function in develop mode. So if I open up an image in develop mode, pardon me, uh, da, 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 um, oh, perhaps I'm mistaken, actually. I thought that was, but yeah, it appears I'm mistaken. Okay, noted. What about skin tune? Is that a general function? No. Masking? No. Well, let's find out. Let's do a brush mask. Yeah, okay, okay. Sorry, I'm educating myself. One moment here, and then I'll answer your question. Split tone, color light, effects, soft focus. Okay, yeah. No. The answer is no. For some reason, I thought that the skin or the face edit tool was also a function of develop mode, but it's not. It's just an edit mode functionality. But frequency separation, more to your point, uh, is not in develop mode because it requires you to make a partition, a layer partition. And as you know, layers are only a function within edit mode, within Ultimate. For example, Professional doesn't have a layer mode. It's just AC/DC Ultimate, Photo Studio Ultimate that has that. So in order to apply a frequency adjustment and to address using this tool, you would have to be in edit mode within the ultimate version of the product. Helen asked, if you change sky, what about the hair then? You mean like if I had gone in and had made a sky like a sky replacement using AI? Is that what you're referring to, Helen? When I go in and I make a when if I find an image here, yeah, okay, I think I understand what you mean. Um, see if I can find an image that has an obvious sky in it. Maybe this one, not great. Let's try this. So one of the aspects of, yeah, this is gonna be maybe, we'll see. Um, let's open up my AI actions. One of the aspects of so if I have gone in and I've said maybe make a sky replacement, let's see how well it can even select the sky in this image. Yeah, not great. Yeah, I mean this if this wasn't such a dark one, obviously, if it was just a regular blue sky function, yeah, even so frequency separation isn't really to address the so here's there's basically what your question involves is how do I change the sky and then apply a frequency separation, or rather how do I address the hair issues in my image? Um, One of the problems here is that when we go to change a sky with, and this is a horrible example just because it's such a bad sky replacement, but when we go to change a sky, what we're doing is we're making a selection of the sky itself, and then we're replacing what is what the selection is, the selection of the sky. But frequency separation isn't really addressing the overlay of the or the edges of the hair around the sky here. What it's doing is we're going in and we're sort of addressing any issues of that appearing over top of the skin or the background. So I guess more to the point is if you have an accurate replacement of your sky, one of the things that that's actually doing, Helen, is it's probably making a selection that removes some of the hair already. So what I mean by that is we're making a sky replacement, whether it be manual or automated with that filter that I was just interacting with, we're probably removing like something like this anyway, right? We're probably removing a portion of the, oops, that was a bad selection. Let me try this again. I'll just do an example there. We're probably removing something like that anyway, in which case there's no point in applying a frequency selection to the edge of our hair when we already have removal of the sky that then has probably removed a portion of the hair that we see anyway. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is I wouldn't do both operations. I would aim to do an accurate replacement of the sky as trying to do the best job you can. Obviously, with stray hairs, or with hair that even in this case there isn't stray hair. It's actually just there's a section of hair right here that is going to be impacted by a or a sky replacement. The best way to do this is to interact with an image that has a really tight partition between the sky itself and the hair. So an image that does not have a lot of and it's flat in terms of it's not existing. Whether some of the hair is blurred out as it was in that example. You need like a really, really tight focus around the subject matter for that hair to really come through and to be for that selection, that sky replacement to be accurate. This one even might, I'm just curious because the sky is visible in this. Let's see. This might, there's so much blur in this image too that I'd be like concerned about let's see. Yeah, it's not going to do a very good job. There's too much blur in the background here for that to be applied correctly. Anyway, I guess long term, what I'm trying to say is when it comes to doing both, I don't think you can really do both because one is trying to address like hairs as they pertain to the background, and trying to get rid of those like fine-tune hairs that are distracting. Typically, when we're removing stray hairs, we're actually removing it over the skin, not over the background. And then versus like removing the background, the sky in it, and replacing it with something else is going to ultimately it's probably going to be interacting with the hair anyway because it's trying to get rid of any of that stray elements that aren't really that visible. It's going to remove them anyway. So I guess where I'm going with this is I would try to do one or the other, not both. Um, MQ asked, "Am I correct that it shouldn't?" Am I correct that it should not is the best way to sharpen a portion of the photo, like the earrings on the first example? Let's see what you're talking about here. Earrings. Oh, the final photo. Okay. Um, Frequency separation can be used for sharpening an image. Uh, And what I mean by that is when I'm not quite sure I understand your question completely, MQ, but I'll entertain it here. When we apply a frequency separation, right, of our image layer, we go and we apply that high pass layer. One of the things we can do is we can actually remove the low pass layer altogether, provided I still have my original here. And this high pass layer operates like a sharpen layer, basically. You can see what its effect is applied just on the original layer. So you can use the frequency layer as a form of sharpness. And then you can further still, you can add some form of, like some form of sharpness layer over top. But yeah, you can. Yeah. And I think there's some benefits to maybe applying a sharpness layer in this way because it's very gentle and it's very universal. We can lower our opacity on this layer as we see fit. The other thing too is we can add in the same way we added a sharpness layer, we can add a mask to this layer, and we can interact with the mask pretty directly. So if I only wanted this frequency separation to apply the sharpness appearance of the sharpness to appear to the let's say the eyes, we can turn it on just on the eyes, as you see here, maybe the mouth and the nose too, just for consistency. But here I have a frequency separation layer with lowered opacity. And then I've put a mask over top of this layer. So there's a mask on the layer. And then I turned this mask off, the effect of the frequency separation off on everything but the actual eyes. I sort of painted the frequency separation on for the eyes. I'm hoping that you understand masking for the purpose of this suggestion. But I'm going to assume a certain degree of literacy here. But yeah, you can do this. It does work that way. You can remove the low pass layer and apply a frequency separation of just the high pass layer. And I can either hide this layer or I can ultimately just delete it entirely. So hopefully that answers your question. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yeah, great. Please do that. Yeah. Robert asked, any equivalents? Oh, right, we answered that already. Does anyone else have any other questions related to frequency separation? I'm still pondering on the way to help Helen in this case. But I think that they're two kind of separate tools, and so they kind of don't really interact with each other that well. Uh, yeah, I think, yeah, I'm just trying to think. And also, I don't have a great example of an image that has really tight sky in the background. But if we, yeah, this is almost a better example of it. But yeah, does anyone else have any other questions before I sort of close up? That is the workshop today that I wanted to talk about. So I appreciate that. I'm sort of just pondering Helen's question further, but I think I might make a tutorial on try to combine them rather than cover it in this workshop because I need to actually think about that question in more depth anyway. So Helen, sort of a long-term answer to your question is I might try to see if I can get a really good example in a tutorial video rather than within this workshop because it requires me to find the correct image to even apply those changes. And my gut is that you can't replace the sky and then also do there's something, yeah, and also address frequency separation as it pertains to hair, because you're kind of removing the hair in order to apply a new background to begin with. But let me ponder that, and it might turn into a tutorial video. It also might not, but I just want to highlight that that might be the case. Sonia, you're so welcome. Gordon, thank you. I appreciate everyone participating today. I'm going to probably close it up for today. And I'll upload this workshop today. I have some time today to finish that and add it on YouTube. You're so welcome, Gord. And as always, if anyone has any other questions, they can always reach out to me over Connect as well. Doug, you're so welcome. Hopefully this was helpful. It's a really okay, thanks. Yeah. Bye, MKO. Take care. Laurent, thank you. Yeah, this is a really powerful tool and it doesn't get talked about enough. And I just want to see people use it. So I try to do a workshop on at least once a year on frequency separation because it's useful in a lot of situations. More than just removing of stray hairs and blemishes, it can also be used to address other issues as well. So thank you, Robert. Thanks, Mike. Okay, thank you, Chuck. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm probably going to mute my mic shortly here. And like I said, reach out over Connect and ask your question there. Helen, I will try to have a long-term answer for you in some sort of tutorial. So yeah, I'll let you know if I have that. I believe that was a question you asked also on the posting itself. So I'll find you, and if I can answer this question in a tutorial, I'll send you a little message about it. Mike uses his for wrinkles, totally. I think that's a great use for this tool as well. Just addresses that within the probably the high pass layer a little bit, or maybe blurs out wrinkles a little bit. Okay, thank you everybody. I'm gonna unmute my mic and I'll turn it off, and I'll just stick around for a couple minutes here before I close up the workshop. So appreciate everyone participating. Thank you for watching my section on frequency separation and for stray hairs and blemish removals. I really appreciate it. Okay, let's see here. Have a great rest of your day.